Hey gang, here we are in the middle of the winter doldrums. There's not a whole lot to do other than grow the beard out. So I thought it might be time to once again talk about riding gear. Now really this topic was brought up by a few viewers who are, I guess, in the middle of looking for new riding gear for the 2022 season. And they noticed that it has been about almost 5 years now since I last did a gear update. And one or two of them were asking for a head-to-toe review of all of the gear that I've been using. Now I have to be honest and let you know that there's not a whole lot that has changed in the last 4 or 5 years. I've added a new helmet, a new pair of boots, which we'll talk about as we go along, but for the most part my gear hasn't changed a whole lot. So the reason for that is that I've found some manufacturers of great helmets, great jackets, pants, other gear that I really like, and so I pretty much have stuck with them, again, over the course of time. It all works for me, so again, I haven't had any reason to really make a whole lot of big changes. So I think the best place to start this discussion is by taking a look at my philosophy for choosing my riding gear. And of course this may be different than yours, and that's perfectly okay, but these are the things that I look for when choosing gear. Now my first priority is, quite honestly, function. I want gear that does the things that I want to do. I want it to do it very well. I also want it to be durable, that is, it's not going to break down on me and need to be replaced. And I want it to be reliable, and that is, it's not going to, for example, leak somewhere out when I'm on my trip. The second thing that I look for is aesthetics. Right? Is it something that makes me feel good, that I enjoy wearing? Now this is nowhere near as important as function, but it's more important than the third item, which is cost. Of course, I do have my own personal budgets, and I look to stay within those bounds. But for me, if I find something that meets my functional criteria and also meets my aesthetical ideas of what I like, the kinds of gear that I like, then I am willing to pay a little bit higher price for it. Over the years, I have found several companies or brands that I am very happy with, and as I said earlier, I pretty much have stuck with them. And they would include Shoei helmets, Climb riding gear, LD Comfort base layers, and Goretex. Now I'm mentioning Goretex specifically here because most of the gear that I choose is Goretex lined, because I want my gloves, my jacket, my pants, and my boots to all be waterproof while I'm out there riding. I personally do not like carrying rain gear. I don't like stopping on the side of the road and putting it on and then 10 minutes later taking it off. I would rather get gear that is 100% waterproof that I don't have to worry about. Now Goretex gear is more expensive. However, I have never had any of my Goretex gloves, boots, or jackets fail under any condition so far. So as long as it keeps working, that is what I'm going to stick with. So going through our head-to-toe review, again, we'll first start up at the head. All right, and we're going to take a look at helmets. Now, as I mentioned, I pretty much exclusively use Shoei helmets. And I do that because of two reasons. One, I know that Shoei is a good company who really puts their money into research, design, and testing. Right. I also know that the Shoei helmets fit me extremely well. I have that intermediate oval head that Shoei's fit really nicely. So, and that's the primary reason I stick with the Shoei's, because comfort is really important to me. I've bought some other helmets that, well, just weren't very comfortable. They were either too tight in the cheeks or they had seams that went across my forehead and gave me headaches. So I would rather spend the money on something I know that fits me, is going to be comfortable. So the three helmets that I currently have are a Shoei Neotech modular helmet, a Shoei RF 1200, and then a Shoei Hornet 2, which is my off-road helmet. The helmet that I wear the most is the RF-1200, and that is because it is extremely comfortable and it is really a quiet helmet. And for me, that quietness is extremely important. Like the modular helmet down there, it is a really nice helmet. It's very comfortable, but it's also a very noisy helmet. Now, whether that is because of the wider chin section that is not quite aerodynamic, or it is because it has a lot more grooves and things for that articulating chin piece, it is a much noisier helmet. I cannot ride on the highway without having earplugs in that helmet. On the RF-1200, I still wear earplugs, but I could do it without the earplugs if necessary. And definitely on the back roads, I don't need any earplugs with that helmet. Now, over the years, I have graduated to wearing only full-face helmets. I started off with a half helmet and three-quarter helmets, and while they were very comfortable, they weren't very practical. My ears hurt because of wind noise. I got hail in my face and, of course, rain in my face, and I just started thinking, Craig, what are you doing? Right? Go out and get yourself a good full-face helmet and stop all this craziness. Now, there are a lot of good helmet manufacturers out there other than Shoei. What you want to primarily make sure that you find is one that works for you, one that is comfortable for you. If you don't have a Shoei head, well, there's no way you're going to ever be comfortable in one. You might be more comfortable in an Arai or a Schuberth or an HJC or an AVG or many of the other good brands that are out there. Unfortunately, it just takes a little trial and error. Go to your dealer and see if they have any helmets in stock that they'll let you wear. I know my dealer, they carry Shoei, and they will let you rent one and take it out on a ride. Right, so that way you can find out if it'll work for you. So next up, let's talk about gloves. Now, like my helmets, I have several different varieties of gloves, each one that fills a particular purpose. Right. So first I have this summertime good weather riding glove, and this is a Superfly mesh glove from Reax, which is Revzilla's house brand. Right, so this has been a very comfortable glove and one that doesn't cost a whole lot of money. It was $69. I said, so far, I really like it, and I would get another one. For wet weather, I have this Climb Goretex Vanguard glove. Again, this has been a great glove. It's 100% waterproof, and again, it has never leaked on me. Now, while this is the short version, I will say if I had to do it again, I think I would get the gauntlet version. And in fact, I may buy a set for my 2022 trip. Now for cold weather, I have these, and they are a Climb inversion glove. Now this isn't technically a straight motorcycle glove. It's also doubles as a ski mobile glove. So the great thing about these are that they have Gore-Tex in them, and they also have Thinsulate, right? So they have a little bit of insulation. Now this is an older model, and from what I've seen on the Climb website, the newer models no longer use the Thinsulate. So I'm not sure on just how much they will insulate. The new model of the inversion is called the Inversion GTX, and it goes for about $110. You can check that out on Climb's website. Now, I do have one other kind of glove that I use, and this is a Climb Dakar glove. And this isn't going to last very long in a get-off on the street, but that's not what it's designed for. This is a real lightweight glove designed for off-road riding where you need a lot of manual dexterity to work the controls, right? And then it'll protect you from, say, a little slide in the dirt. So next up, let's talk about my riding jacket. And as you can see, this is again a Climb Latitude jacket, again Gore-Tex lined, 100% waterproof. Now, while I am currently riding with this style of jacket, I didn't start off that way. I went through an evolution just like I'm sure most of you have, where I started off using a Tourmaster mesh jacket that had liners that you zipped in and out. And while I thought that this would be a versatile solution to touring, I quickly found out that it was a pain in the butt to constantly be zipping those liners in and out all of the time. And on top of that, I also found out that that rain liner that was in it, well, it didn't work very well, and I still needed to carry a set of rain gear with me. So in fact, getting rid of that rain gear was one of the primary drivers for investing in the Climb jacket. I mean, riding with my wife, we had 2 sets of this heavy, bulky rain gear that we had to carry around with us all of the time, and it literally took up an entire saddlebag in my Victory Vision. So I wanted to get rid of that stuff in the worst way. So Climb jackets are what they call technical shells. And that is, it's just an outer layer for protection, holding your pads and so forth, as well as the inner Goretex liner that is fused with the outer Cordura. All right, so that makes the jacket 100% waterproof, but it doesn't insulate it in any way. All right, to get insulation, you have to buy a mid-layer of some kind, or in my case, you might carry 2 different kinds of mid-layers, right, to give you that warmth that you need on a cool day. Now, one question I always get about the Climb jackets, or any other jacket that's made in a similar manner, is, isn't that hot, right? And look, any jacket that you wear, if you're sitting in traffic with the sun beating down on you, well, it's going to get warm in there, right? However, the jacket has great ventilation when you're moving, right? There are vents here in the chest, there's vent here near the armpits, and then there's actually vents down here on the wrist as well, which are actually really cool. They help to get the air flowing through your jacket really nicely. Right. Another great feature of this jacket is that you can actually pull back these collars and pin them back and open that up for some additional airflow. Again, that's been a really great feature for me. Now, I've personally worn this jacket in temperatures as low as 27 degrees, riding down the interstate coming back from Tennessee, and 114 degrees crossing Death Valley. And in all those situations, when combining the right base layers and mid layers, I was quite comfortable. So next up, let's briefly talk about pants, because they're basically the same as the jacket, but just for your lower body. Cordura, outer shell, a Goretex inner lining, and they do have ventilation that allows air to flow through. And if you've never had vented pants, well, they're pretty cool, pun intended. Next up, let's talk about something that I have found to be extremely important in keeping myself comfortable while I am traveling. In fact, maybe the most important item that I can think of, and that is finding a good quality base layer. What I have on here is my favorite base layer, and that is the ones that come from LD Comfort. LD Comfort stands for Long Distance Comfort, and it was initially designed as an undergarment for long distance cyclists, guys that are doing iron butts and those kinds of things. It's a dual layer fabric that grabs the sweat off of your body, wicks it out to the surface where it's held in that outer layer of the fabric, and it can be evaporated and thus keeping you cooler. Now, my LD Comfort base layers are, again, the foundation for any time that I ride, whether I'm riding in hot conditions or in cool conditions. You might be interested to find that I actually prefer this long sleeve version when riding in really hot conditions. In fact, I had this one on when I was riding through Death Valley when it was 114 degrees. Now, of course, there are a wide variety of base layers out there that all do similar things. That is, they wick sweat out, up, away from your skin, keeping you drier and allowing it to evaporate more quickly. Right? They come from companies like LD Comfort, Climb, Under Armour, or even companies like Champion that you can find at your local sporting goods store. Right? It really all depends upon the kind that you want and how much you want to spend. One example is this kind of base layer. This comes from a company called Hot Chilies, and it's a fleece base layer. Somebody actually gave this to me a few years back, and I found out that it worked pretty well, so I've kept it. Right, when I need to be a little bit warmer, then I can use this over my LD Comfort. And in some cases, I even combine the two. I recently did that when I was coming back from Tennessee on that trip that I told you about when it was 27 degrees. So let me take a few minutes to talk about wool base layers, because I know that there are a lot of people out there who really like merino wool base layers. Again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. I have had one or two in the past myself. For me, I found out that they work really well in cold weather, but I thought they were too warm for me in warmer weather. So the only way to know is for you to try them yourself. And unfortunately, that's the way this is going to work for any of these base layers. You won't know what works for you until you try a few here or there. So that may mean that you have to spend a little bit of money, invest a little bit of money and time, right, to find out what works best, again, for you. So next up, let's talk about what I've got on now, and that is a mid layer. Right, this is the insulated layer that goes underneath your jacket and between your jacket and your base layer to help keep you warm in cold weather. Now, I have two base layers that I'm going to be carrying with me on my trip for 2022. And I'm going to be doing that because some of the locations that we're going to be going is up at pretty high altitude, 8,000 feet and higher. And even during June and July, well, it gets pretty cold up there, especially in the mornings. So I've got this Climb Inferno jacket that I'll take with me, and then I've got this one as well. And that is this jacket, the Patagonia Micro Puff Jacket. Now, wearing either one of these jackets by themselves, I can go down into the 40s rather easily when I'm riding. But if I need to go down into the 30s and even upper 20s, well, then I can combine the two base layers and they really keep me pretty warm. In fact, this has become my go-to method of staying warm during our cold New England winters here. I just throw both of these layers on and I can go outside at pretty much any temperature. So next up, let's talk about socks. Right, and what I wear for socks are these from Revit, and these are, again, synthetic moisture wicking socks. I particularly like the knee-high ones with a little bit of compression because it helps with my circulation as I'm getting older. Now, of course, as with base layers, there are many socks to choose from out there. You just have to take a look at your favorite manufacturer, find something that is within your price range, and give them a try. Okay, so now here we are all the way down at the feet, so we're going to talk about riding boots. Like my choice in helmets and my choice in jackets and riding gear, my choice in boots has also evolved over the years. When I first started out, I was riding in a pair of waterproof Dan Post cowboy boots, and they worked great. They were really comfortable. My feet never got wet in those boots. Said they were really great. I thought about buying a new pair. But over time, I have gravitated more towards more motorcycle-specific gear, right, for specific purposes, and that gives me a little bit more protection. Now, I say a little bit more protection because you look at something like this boot, and you would think, man, that's a pretty beefy boot. That is going to give you a lot of protection. And it does for certain things. It has better shin protection, better heel protection. You know, slightly bit of lateral flexion, but I can bend this boot over quite easily. Right? Also, this boot crushes very easily. Now, unfortunately, I found out this the hard way. I was using this boot on an off-road ride, and I went down on the bike and ended up catching my left foot between the frame and the foot peg and broke my foot in 3 different places. Right? Because, again, this boot crushed quite easily. So while I wore this boot going to Alaska, and it was great, kept my feet warm, kept my feet dry, is easy to walk around in, right? It lacks if you're looking for protection in a crash, especially if you're riding off-road. So for my off-road riding, I ended up going to a boot like this, which is the Alpinestars Tech 7 Enduro with DryStar. So again, it's not a Goretex boot, but it is 100% waterproof, and the DryStar does an excellent job, at least it has for me so far. Now this boot is bomb-proof, right? This gives you just a ton of protection, but it is an extremely stiff boot as well. It's not something you're going to walk around in a lot, and believe me, everybody is going to hear you coming. This thing squeaks like crazy, but that is part of what you have to put up with if you want that protection. Here's my other boot, and probably the one that I use most often. In fact, I know it is the one that I use most often, because if I'm going out on a club ride or even a long trip, on the road, then I'm not looking for something that has all of the protection that one of these adventure boots or one of the enduro boots has to offer. Right? I just want something that is going to have a little bit stiffer sole, give me some toe protection, some heel protection, maybe some malleolar protection, which this has, but it's still going to allow me to walk around and be very comfortable in. Now this is the Jupiter 4 boot from TCX. Again, it is Goretex lined, and I've ridden this in some very rainy conditions, and it works great. And as I said, it is very comfortable to walk around in. It doesn't have any crush protection, right? That can crush very easily, and the lateral support is minimal as well. But again, those are the things that you're going to give up if you want long distance comfort and more walkability. Now this particular boot is getting a little bit long in the tooth. I've had it for a number of years now, and it's starting to break down a little bit, and in particular the sole is getting really smooth and it's getting a little bit slick again on a rainy day. So I think it's time to replace this. So I'm going to be doing a search on what to replace this with. I can get another Jupiter 4. It's been a very great boot, so that's at the top of my list. Or TCX makes a couple of other touring boots that I'm going to look at. Again, these will be Goretex boots, and I would like to get a low height boot, again, to make it easier to walk around in. CD also makes a really nice pair of boots that I may look at. So I'll do a whole video on my search for a new boot to replace this old Jupiter 4 model coming up in the future. So I guess that completes our head-to-toe gear review, at least of all of my gear that I use. Again, you guys take this information and use what you think is useful and throw the rest away, right? These are all just my choices. You have to make your own choices, of course. Now, if you want to see what we're going to be doing with all of this gear, well, you can go to my website at www.livingofftheslab.com, and you can scroll down a little bit and join our free online community where we're having a discussion about my travel plans for 2022. I believe I have 11 videos in that series out right now, going into a lot of detail about how I'm planning this trip and where we're going and so forth. And so we're going to be continuing that, well, throughout the rest of this winter before we leave in about the third week of May of 2022 on this big trip. So again, if you want to follow that, head to the website. See you later, guys. Ride safe.